Hello, I'm going to present the paper name Looking to See, Touching to Understand. So, what to do for conservation paper? This paper contains site work on documentation of traditional village houses. We organize a team with the support of NIF Olympus excavation organization. They host us in their archaeological research house, and we studied, we survey with Mrs. Süheyla, Dr. Süheyla Koç, and 5 of my students from 19 Mayıs University, Department of Architecture, who are Batuhan Ecem, Yavuz Selim, Usame, and Cem. I would thank you to them and NIF Olympus organizers, the manager of Elif Tültülnay and Professor and Dr. Müjde Türkmen. In these photographs are the aerial photos. This is taken from 1956, and the other is 2020. In rural settlements, all houses built with traditional construction techniques are primary phenomenological elements that give a sense of locality and belongings. The number of these structures in rural settlements are decreasing day by day, and with the tools offered by the modern construction industry in different typologies, new structures are being built independent of the possibilities and tools offered by the place. This situation is the repetition of an endless ubiquity stripped of the built environment, which is an indicator of the physical environment. It detaches the place from its architectural reality, which is one of the elements that gives its soul. This is the site, the general view of site from the heights of the Nif Olympus mountain. This Nif Olympus mountain is beside of the Izmir Bay, the city of Izmir beside of this mountain. This is at the ancient age, Olympus means the great mountain. That's because this mountain called in the ancient age as a Olympus, and in contemporary name is Nif. In Dağ Kızılca village is at the south side of this mountain, and this is the archaeological sites that are managing in the Nif Olympus excavation house. In Başpınar, there is a monastery, a Byzantine monastery, and a church. It is aged early times, nearly 300 and 600 period. Karamattepe is a settlement age, geometrical age before Christianity settlement, and the Balıcıoğluk situation. There is a Hellenistic castle walls, And in the Dağ Kızılca, there is a necropolis site beside of the village. As you see, there is surrounded with forest and the agricultural lands on the flat lands. This study is about the residential buildings of local architecture located in Dağ Kızılca village, Torbalı, district of İzmir province. Dağ Kızılca village has been preferred by new settlers in the last 10 years, both because of the ruins of its former residents who had migrated from the village for various reasons, and because this village is close to the metropolitan city center. Today, with the diversification of needs, the comfort equipment provided by all traditional residential spaces has changed and diversified. In the process, three attitudes towards old houses, be it built with local traditional materials and construction techniques, have developed. The first is to protect the houses by carrying out simple maintenance and repairs and by making renovations to their interiors in accordance with current comfort conditions. The other is, in addition to the maintenance and repairs of the buildings, the construction of special additions suitable for comfort conditions. Finally, the buildings are partially demonstrated and spaces containing comfort conditions are added, and the plans, facades, and roofs of the buildings are reconstructed and renewed with up-to-date materials. The exterior walls, as you see in this photo, in the village are made of white and red stone, which is unique to the region, extracted from the vicinity of the village. The inner skeleton and roof of the residence buildings are built with wooden materials. Lumber can be obtained easily and cheaply from the forest management chief and carpenter workshops in the village. The use of stone and adobe materials in the buildings and the tiled roofs, shutters, eaves, chimney, wooden beams are the basic elements of the holistic appearance of the village. Although it creates a first-hand awareness of its quality for any traveler in the historical traditional environment, that quality cannot be understood without careful study. In this context, the hypothesis of our study is the architect should know the environment he works in and should try to interpret the spirit of the place in his design without ignoring the history and tradition. For this, the architect should experience the work area physically, try to grasp the space and life by developing a dialogue with the social environment. As you see, both of them are the old houses, the original traditional vernacular buildings, but this is covered with mud. In our study, we visited the village of Dağ Kızılca in which we worked, first of all, with the map in our peasant hands. We photographed and sketched. We classified the structures in the village based on our observations. In this process, we developed acquaintance with the villagers. By gaining information about the village, the houses and their owners, we updated our findings in our first observation and identified the original examples of the building types that were first built in the village and the characteristic building typology that gave the village its identity. we drew the reliefs of the structures we determined. The history of the current settlement in Dalkızılca village is also old as the Republic of Turkey. In the village, all buildings except 3 houses were burned in the fire that broke out during the War of Independence. In our interviews with the village people, we learned that the structures are built by the masters in the village, in accordance with the old typologies in the early Republican period and later. The dominant typology in the general view of the village is 2-story masonry stone houses. The information that most of the stone houses in the village were built before 1960. It is based on the statements of the house owner we interviewed and our determinations based on aerial photographs. The village has a unique pattern with its dwelling, which open to the plain with a short valley through which thin water flows, and whose main settlements is scattered over the slopes throughout the valley. The buildings in the main square of the village were bazaar located in the creek are the original examples of the characteristic housing typology of the village. The population of the village is 822 in 2022. Many buildings cannot be seen from the street as they are behind the garden wall. Again, in many residences, the residents of the residences had their facades insulated due to the comfort of the space, renewed their windows with PVC material, had kitchen modules installed in the interior, arranged the bathroom spaces, equipped them with sanitary ware accessories, and had them structurally strengthened. They added balconies and terraces to the buildings. The maintained arrangements have been made in order to provide the comfort needed in the buildings during the usage process. The terrace, balconies, and wet spaces annexes in the buildings have made the main mass invisible by wrapping it. Since most of the houses have an appearance like a new formed buildings, they originally can be perceived only when they are inside. The building dimensions, eaves, and chimneys of all the old houses in the village are similar. Stone masonry with wooden beams is dominant on the facades of the Kızılca house. However, some facades of the buildings were plastered or grotted with cemetery mortar, and the original stone texture of the facade become invisible. In this context, it has been observed that the original masonry system is preserved in general. The facades facing the street are plastered with lime or cemetery mortar, and the other facades are strengthened by the grouting with up-to-date filling materials in some buildings. In this study were documented 15 unique buildings in the village according to the plant typologies. The houses in the village, we determined that there are 3 types as side sofa, front sofa, and mid sofa. The most common plant typology is the front sofa plant type. In this 2-story building type, the buildings usually sits on a rectangular area close to the square measuring. The entrance to the building is generally located in the middle of the long side, and there is a stairwell on the right arm that provides access to the upper floor. There are 2 rooms opposite to the entrance. As you see in this chart, the mid sofa here, you are entering to the sofa, and to the rooms, and front sofa, you are entering to the sofa, and then you go into the rooms, and there is a stair box here. You see a stair box here. The expansion of the development with the framework of the United Nations in the context of the conservation of the vernacular architectural heritage revealed at the 20th International ICOMOS meeting. In 1999, at this meeting, the Vernacular Architectural Heritage Regulation published. And there is 7 main titles were while preservation process started to do, they defined. And this is the general view of the village. How can the vernacular architecture heritage conserve? A sustainable approach towards built heritage must be set with not only to put in value our tangible and immaterial legacy for the present and the future, but also the enhanced living conditions of each community. The way to protect the settlement character and cultural heritage will be possible by ensuring the continuity of its existence. The continuity of its existence can be achieved by keeping the place, the social memory that makes that place at the sense of attachment to the place alive. For this reason, conservation plans and design policies specific to that place should be produced for qualified and unique traditional settlement in order to ensure the continuity of the settlement patterns. It should adopt a planning and design approach that can preserve the continuity of the space and revive the sense of belonging. Cultural properties are included into the content of protection in the context of their heritage value, and they are included in our daily lives through national policies and programs by being taken into the heritage cycle process. According to Riegel, an understanding of values will always be central to the proper preservation of heritage. At the core of conservation is understanding where these values are formed, because this is what we are trying to protect and preserve. Heritage values need to be positioned at the center of community life. Accordingly, the process begins with the recognition and understanding of cultural heritage, increased interest in recognized heritage values. Visits to heritage sites take place due to the increased interest. That leads to the improvements in the location of the cultural heritage and access to its surroundings and service opportunities in the area. With increasing interest and investment, these areas become active to spend time. Conservation and management of cultural heritage is associated with the 22 in 100 of Sustainable Development Goals. In this context, value-based conservation is contemporary conservation approach. Value-based conservation has adopted and defined as an approach that aims to identify, maintain, and increase the importance of cultural heritage property. The preservation of values was at the heart of the idea of conservation activity. Value assessment has therefore become a mandatory activity in determining the significance of heritage objects' place and relevant conservation decisions. So, natural and cultural heritage conservation must start with the recognition and leading of the values of rural and traditional architecture. At the end, I want to say the heritage preservation is possible by preserving non-renewable heritage resources, promoting the continued use of old buildings, maintaining social capital, and reducing environmental impact by generating economic resources while preserving the human skills and creativity inherent in cultural heritage resources. This requires developing comprehensive conservation actions that consider equally the ecological and resource values of built heritage, applying restoration and reuse processes that are friendly with the environment. The study of the traditional architecture makes sense only insofar as it always us to grow in harmony with nature and society. Thank you very much for your interest.